Kingdom Come Deliverance is special. As a crowd-funded, first-person, immersive RPG set in 1400s Bohemia, it caused quite the splash when it came out in 2018 for being both ambitious and different, while also having quite a lot of rough edges in its design, as well as a host of game-breaking bugs upon release. In fact, when I first played the game last summer, I was nervous, but it wasn't long until the game had sunk its hooks into me like no other game before, despite its awkward first few hours. I was charmed. I was enamored. Enamored. I keep going back to that word, enamored. Why is that? The dictionary meaning of enamored is affected by strong feelings of love, admiration, or fascination, but that doesn't quite describe why I like to use that word for this game. To me, in this context, I think being enamored by something is more complicated than simply liking or loving something. To me, being enamored with something speaks of a greater vulnerability or bias, a love of something despite its flaws, or in love with something that defies logic and reason. Kingdom Come Deliverance does have its flaws, and its unintended points of friction that, in a lesser game, could greatly detract from the experience. But because what Kingdom Come Deliverance does is so unique, and because the most important parts are done so well, the flaws are only minor annoyances that I'm very willing to look past because there really is no game like this. So, with the arrival of its long-awaited sequel around the corner, I wanted to write a love letter to this game. I wanted to talk about how it completely charmed me and drew me into its world. And yeah, near the end, I'll complain about some of the annoying things in the game, and I'll talk about the improvements I hope they make in the sequel. I'm Blake the Rat Shepherd. Please like and subscribe and all that jazz if you dig content like this. Now, let's get into why I love this game in no particular order. I'll only be lightly talking about the main plot and characters, but I will be spoiling certain elements, so if you have not finished the game and spoilers are important to you, this is not the video for you. Also, keep in mind, I first played this game in 2024 in its most polished state, so my bias reflects a finished game, an experience that many did not have, especially in 2018. First, the context. KCD is set in Bohemia, which is the modern-day Czech Republic in the year 1403, and you play as Henry, the son of a blacksmith. After being sent to do various tasks for your dad, like getting him some beer, classic dad stuff right there, shit hits the fan in your small village because, yes, this is a classic coming-of-age story, and your parents, they gotta fucking die, man, to get the plot rolling. So, yeah, anyway, that happens. The local lord, Sir Radzig, basically takes you in as a squire, and the plot involves a lot of detective work around the province to uncover who is responsible for the death of your parents and the destruction of the village, all while meeting a colorful cast of characters with interesting moral choices to make along the way. What separates KCD from other RPGs is its attention to detail and its dedication to those details. I am obviously no historian, and I know that gameplay and story are always going to be the first considerations behind realism and historical accuracy, but KCD does a wonderful job of keeping that illusion unspoiled, and I'd be damned if I could tell the real from the unreal without digging up Wikipedia. For example, Sir Radzig and Hans Capon and others are based on real people, and the game has an in-depth codex of its own to explain the setting. The importance of faith and religion on the people, the role of women in society, how bathrooms worked at the time, and yeah, it's a lot of useful information. Doubtlessly, the codex in the game is not meant to be 100% historically accurate. I'm sure there are a lot of changes or biases that the game has to facilitate its gameplay and narrative, but I just love that it's there. Even without cracking open the codex, just looking at the game, you could tell it's different. This is not a fantastical setting. It's quite plain and mundane in many ways, and I love that. I love how the entire open world is not this epic, gorgeous land, but just like a few square miles of bright green hills and forests. I like the ruggedness of its structures. I love how dense the foliage is, how dark the night is. It's bland, but in a grounded way that ironically makes everything else so much more interesting. Something that makes the game intimidating to pick up, yet so rewarding once you do, is that Henry, being basically just a peasant boy, is understandably bad at everything in a way that other games are hesitant to show. You literally don't know how to read, at the beginning at least. Everything is awkward and even a little tedious at first, which can be a drag, but by the end of the game you become quite powerful, and to me, it was a very fun progression system of a boy becoming a man, so to speak. Starting off with archery, you will literally take damage at a low level unless you wear a van brace, and your shots are incredibly wobbly, and to get better, you just need to practice, which both levels you up in the game, making shots easier to make, but also levels you up in real life as you gain a better understanding on how to aim. With melee combat, it's largely the same. You're awkward and bad at it until you realize one day that you're not. And honestly, the best way to get good at it is to practice. Specifically with Tim Wald's oldest known ancestor, Bernard. That's a historical fact that's verified by Warhorse. They're actually related, and you should always believe things that you hear on the internet. I would never lie to you about this. But like going back to Bernard, literally practice with him for a few hours, like a few hours in your own real life, because it takes that long to both level up Henry, and it also takes that time for your own muscle memory to develop before the combat gets enjoyable. I found the process fun and realistic of literally having to spar to get better. But for those people who don't, this is a turn-off point of the game. Before I get ahead of myself, let me explain how combat works. Like many games, stamina management is important. Taking damage also makes you lose stamina, and when you're out of stamina, you die very fast. Armor can negate a lot of damage, so some of my most favorite fights involve the careful, daring balance of maintaining the offensive so that their stamina does not regenerate while leaving myself vulnerable to attacks for the same reason. It's a little difficult to describe, in part because there are some clunky aspects that hurt the experience. A big reason for that clunkiness is the concept of master strikes. In another game, it's basically just a perfect parry. Wait for the enemy to attack, then block it at the proper moment. A master strike is a perfect block in which Henry automatically counterattacks. Pretty standard stuff, right? Except it's done pretty poorly. Enemies can master strike you at any time, meaning the best way to play is to play passively. As in, instead of striking first and leaving yourself vulnerable, you wait until they strike, and then you perform a master strike, and so on and so on. This is a boring way to play, so I often didn't. There's also combos to do, but they rarely work for me. I'm not sure if it's just because of my skill or if it's just because they would master strike me before I could complete one, but regardless, I never got much practice in. Another blemish on combat is that it breaks apart when fighting multiple enemies. Now, I love the fact that group fights are difficult. In real life, assuming you don't have a gun, if you are outnumbered, statistically, you will lose. That's just the way the math works. So I like how there are high stakes when engaging with multiple enemies. The problem is that the camera will often stick to just one enemy and that they are very gung-ho on surrounding you, making maneuvering around and possibly escaping difficult. And fighting them in the best way is also the least fun. You run backwards, master strike, run backwards, master strike, run backwards. It's not that great. A simple way to play that is still fun is to simply use maces and other blunt weapons. All the stuff about Master Strike still apply, but because blunt weapons ignore a percentage of armor, aiming for the head and just giving your foes a few good whacks is incredibly effective. Bonk, bonk, bonk. Back to talking about progression, when you are set loose in the world with no armor or good weapons, the countryside is properly intimidating, and even lone, unarmored bandits can fuck you up. In the late game, between the armor and skills you acquire, combat gets much easier, but it's the kind of easy that will become very hard if you let your guard down. A pack of unarmored peasants with pitchforks and axes can and absolutely will fuck you up, even in the endgame if you allow yourself to get surrounded, and I love that so much. There's a lot of room for player expression, both in your build and how you approach quests. Normally, if the game allows it, I will play a cunning, charismatic thief type, but for my main playthrough, I made Henry a meathead himbo who lacks the guile and attention span to pick locks, and instead handled most conflicts, directly. And as for the quests themselves, there are often multiple ways to handle them. Some outright suggested or implied, and some you could just find on your own. For example, in the main story, you have to kill a monk in a monastery in order to get information from some of the bandits that fucked your town up. There are multiple ways into the monastery, most of them requiring stealth, and one of those ways has you impersonating a monk. That involves following the routine over several days as you blend in with everyone else and identify your mark. I did not do this, because it sounded like a lot of work for my himbo Henry. So I simply climbed up the church, crouched down on the roof, and shot an arrow at the guy chilling in the open courtyard who matched the description of my mark, and I prayed to God it was the right guy. It was. And I hightailed it out of there, exhilarated that my plan worked, like a moment straight out of Assassin's Creed. Another example was near the end of the game when you are asked to help build a trebuchet. I was tasked with getting a trebuchet expert to help with the design, but the expert naturally wanted me to do something for him too. Pacing-wise, this was incredibly annoying because it felt like more busy work at a pivotal part of the story, and I'd already done so much running around for other missions that I saved the game and vented my frustrations out on the trebuchet expert with my fist. In my head, I was frustrated because the guy who killed my father is hunkered down inside a castle, and I have to do a random task for this fuck? But it turns out violence was an option, and he surrenders and is basically like, okay, I guess I'll help you now. You've made a convincing argument. That was very satisfying to me. I wouldn't exactly call this game an immersive sim. There's not enough tools in the toolkit to call it that, but there are certainly immersive sim elements. Here, I want to talk about my favorite characters, starting with Sir Radzig. He's a cool guy. The reveal that he is actually Henry's father was made pretty clear from 1,000 miles away. I mean, just look at how similar their faces are, but he's a nice, respectable noble who was motivated to not disappoint. Then there's Henry's buddy, Lord Hans Capon, and being honest, yes, Henry and Hans are canonically straight, but my god, there is so much gay chemistry here, so I can't help but to make gay jokes at them whenever they're both together. Which, to be fair, is pretty normal since straight guys behave in the most gay ways out of all the demographics. This is obvious and self-evident, and I will not elaborate. I love their banter, and the contrast of Henry being a rough peasant boy and Hans being a spoiled noble kid. It's a classic pairing. I like that. Editing Blake here. It seems like I'm wrong on Henry being canonically straight, since as of late January, it's been confirmed that there is now a gay romance option in the sequel. Very exciting. And the last guy I want to talk about is Father Goodwin. Oh, Father Goodwin. He is a parish priest of Uschitz. Is that how you say it? I'm not correcting myself. Uschitz? Uschitz. Who was the younger son of some noble and was even a mercenary when he was younger, making him unique as a priest because despite being old, he's still a brawling, womanizing, heavy drinking, and heavy philosophizing kind of guy. Editing Blake here again, I totally misremembered. Father Godwin is not Father Goodwin. He is Father Godwin. Also, I slightly get details of his quest wrong. You don't brawl him, you brawl with him. It's a very important distinction. Anyway, for a story mission, I needed info from him. I forget what info. It's been a while since I played this quest, but it involved asking him nicely at first, then getting into a fist fight with him, then getting shit-faced at the tavern with him, causing so much of a ruckus that we ended up drunkenly having an orgy near the church with the women, not him. And then in the morning, Father Goodwin, being hungover to the point of being useless, asked me to do his Sunday sermon for him. There are a lot of dialogue options when you do the sermon. People are understandably upset that it's you on the pulpit, not him. Now, I assume there are ways to massively fuck this up, but through sheer luck, whatever dialogue options I picked right, I guess. I pointed out the hypocrisy of the church and how everyone is born with sin and how that is normal and that we should not pretend otherwise or judge others from it, and it worked. Everyone loved that stuff.
No, brothers and sisters. Jesus did not condemn alcohol. Drink to lighten the cross you bear in this vale of tears, but not with such abandon that you cannot keep holy the Sabbath. For there should be moderation in all things, and it is not drinking itself that is sinful, but intemperance and beastly indulgence.
He's right.
Really, one of the highlights of the game, and it seems like Father Goodwin is appearing at least a little bit in the sequel, and I'm super excited to see him again. Speaking of Father Goodwin, I love how much religion plays a role in the lives of everyone here. Now me, I'm a big, obnoxious atheist, but because, historically, religion was so important to the structure of society, I do love how prominent the churches are, how detailed they are in their design. I love how people will say, Jesus Christ be with you, or make the sign of the cross when something off is happening. It's something you'd never see in a major AAA kind of game because most game publishers are hesitant at including any real religion in a game. But here, Christianity is at the forefront of society, just like it was in the time period, and I appreciate how much it adds to the immersion of it all. God, this game is just so immersive. I think the only game as grounded and immersive as this that I've played recently was Stalker 2, which is another game made by a AA European studio. Speaking of immersion, sleeping and eating are important, and there's a whole skill tree dedicated to drinking. Normally, I don't like survival type elements in games, but here it's organic enough that I was engaging in those systems naturally, and free stew, probably goulash,
and as you can see, the goulash is finished,
is available almost all the time in any settlement, so it's not tedious at all, except Henry can be a little grouchy when he's hungry. It's not just the food either. NPCs will notice how dirty you are and what kind of clothes you are wearing. If you're dirty and tattered, you are less charismatic, making haggling and speech checks more difficult. But if you are clean, wearing proper clothing, people will like you more. So there's this nice rhythm of getting into town, washing up, fixing clothes, buying food and equipment, and then setting out on the countryside for another quest. A very immersive system that the game has is its alchemy system, which involves combining a liquid like oil or water with herbs and adding heat. It's very fun and reminds me of cooking. Anyway, where was I? Ah yes, how the game has so many detailed immersive systems, but naturally some things are built with just gameplay in mind, like horses. This is not a critique, I just find it humorous how much care there is in sword fighting and alchemy and a reputation system. But horses? Horses are just ATVs that spawn behind you at the press of a button and can go almost anywhere incredibly fast. My girlfriend, who is a horse girl, hated when I was on a horse because, man, I was going places. I didn't give a fuck. I'd point my stallion in a direction and mash the gallop button like it was my old Yamaha blaster. Another unrealistic aspect that makes sense from a gameplay perspective is that even though the story takes place only over the course of a few weeks, you could spend in-game months, possibly years, running around, doing side quests, and just living your life. But the seasons never change. Kingdom Come Deliverance is set during an endless summer, during an endless full moon. And over the course of the game, we could see Henry turn into an ignorant village boy to the richest man in the province with a kill count that would make a professional assassin blush. This doesn't change my enjoyment at all, just something I find amusing, just a touch of ludonarrative dissonance that is very easy to brush away. Now, speaking of the rough edges of the game, I already touched on some of the more annoying aspects of combat, but a few other annoyances are: 1. Mutt, the dog you get, assuming you got the DLC, is a very good boy who, unfortunately, is always howling. It is incredibly annoying, and I'm kind of amazed that this has never been fixed in a patch. The music is good, but there's not a lot of songs, so over the course of my 100 hours with the game, I was going crazy with the repetitive music, and even at the end, turned it off. I admit I'm a little sensitive to repetitive music. I have the same issue with Baldur's Gate 3. And I do hope there's more music in the sequel, but there is a scene in which I was torturing a guy and the cheerful music came back up again. I think it was a bug. And it was kind of funny and just kind of like, yep, here we go. We're listening to this song again while I'm torturing this dude. Okay, that's cool.
He'll sacrifice you just like everyone in Vranic and Pribyslavitz. You're nothing but a common bandit.
On the subject of quests, I like how the game doesn't hold your hand, and I like that you could fail some time-specific ones, but some of the quests were just so unintuitive and janky, for lack of a better word. Part of this might be down to my own lack of critical thinking abilities, but getting stuck and having to look up a guide did kill the pacing and enjoyment for quite a few of the quests. Namely the ones that had a big hazy yellow area to search for, and there's like one contextual thing that you gotta click on. Those were annoying. And lastly, this could be a skill issue. I'm not sure if this is a valid critique or not, but I could not get into lockpicking at all on the controller. Normally I play as a stealthy boy, and the reason why I didn't was the lockpicking. I have tried and tried and tried. On mouse and keyboard, I was able to do it easily enough, but I almost exclusively play on a gamepad because I'm pretty new to the whole PC gaming thing, and yeah, I'm kind of nervous about this and my abilities to handle lockpicking in the sequel because I want to be a thief. Again, I love that archetype and that playstyle. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I couldn't get into the lockpicking, and that was a bummer. But overall, right now in January 2025, there is nothing like Kingdom Come Deliverance. It is so good. This is the kind of game that makes the art form so special and radical. The ability of good games to completely whisk you away into a different world. Funded on Kickstarter, no less. It's a miracle this game even came out. And yeah, on release, it was buggy and unfinished, but playing this game now in 2025, it is a masterpiece, hands down. My hope for the sequel is that I'll get more of the same, just more refined, more polished, more focused, more experience, and everything I've seen indicates that is the case. I cannot wait. Anyway, I hope you all like this love letter. I can't really call this a review because I'm just glazing this game. This game's so good. Please like the video if you made it this far, and I'll, of course, definitely be covering the sequel. I'm very excited to explore the main city. Thanks, and have a wonderful day.